The girl in the basement. When it comes to her sister, Chris, Jeanette really won't talk about her much, trying to shield people she still loves. But she will say Chris also had a very traumatized childhood. Jeanette says she was sent to the principal's office after their move from Holt Summit to Cameron, Missouri, for pulling out her eyelashes. She says around the same time, Chris tried to blind herself by staring at the sun. As an adult, Jeanette wonders, what did they see? In Cameron, Jeanette says her dad was still hiding in closets and would stand on the toilet and watch from above or hide in the shower and peek at her on the toilet. In an email she wrote, "This was happening until I was about 12 years old and could better protect myself." As I studied their father's journal, I put a down arrow every time he criticized Chris, said something mean about her, or commented on how cold she was toward him. There were a lot of arrows. A couple of times, Jeanette questioned her mom about that time frame in Holt's Summit, where she saw a girl in a zipper bag.
I said, something happened to us in Holt Summit. And she said, yes, something happened to you. Something happened. You got over it, but Chris never did. And I said, then what was it? I said, whatever happened to our babysitter? And she said, oh gosh, she was just some drug addict. She just ran away. So I could never get any comments from her on this that made sense.
The trauma never goes away.
I went back to that house the last time I was in Missouri intentionally because everyone was gone. I didn't have anyone to visit. And I looked up where we had lived and I knocked on the door. And the lady was nice enough to let me walk down those stairs. And it was exactly, I was trying to remember why were the stairs so short? Why? And it was like a half basement stair walk down. It was an exact picture that I remembered. And so I guess it's just one of those haunting nightmares for me. I find myself looking for missing girls, trying to figure out who was that girl. It could just be a ghost I'm chasing. I just know it bothered me for my entire life. It still bothers me to talk about it. So I have a passion for finding missing girls because of that. It was the smell, the sounds. It's very, very real to me.
Previously on The Toll, poison, control.
And he said, and the headaches, the splitting headaches. He goes, my head hurts so bad.
Jim left here and died. Jim left here and died.
Half of the people at Christmas were violently throwing up.
Oh, I must just be a bad cook because people keep getting sick.
And I don't know where to draw the line, and everything is her fault and nothing's her fault. But I'm saying this was weird. This was very odd.
I'm an award-winning journalist who has spent decades chasing stories and investigating cases across the Ozarks. It's tragic, really.
I don't believe in coincidence.
We all have a story.
Nobody was able to make it because everybody was sick.
A dark secret wrapped in emptiness and regret.
Within a year, her entire nuclear family died.
You know.
Tons and tons of chemicals.
The Toll. I'm Nancy Simpson. I had so much to dig through, but Jeanne wrote the most about our next time frame. Before husband number 4 in California, before Bruce in Utah, there was Roy Forgy in Ottumwa, Iowa. Roy was 55 and Jeanne was 45. He was a drug and alcohol rehab counselor for an agency in town.
My mother was very active in the Mormon church and dressed modestly and very kind of a classy lady. And Roy was definitely more like the pinup girl, kind of scruffy beard, say it like it is, put a beer on the table kind of thing. But they seemed to get along really well. So she really liked his personality, I guess, because 2 weeks after they met, then they were engaged.
2 weeks.
Yeah. And I think they got married that December. They met that fall and they quickly did get married. Yes. They hit it off.
Jeannie Spriggs, her married name from her first husband, and Roy were introduced to each other at a bar in Ottumwa, Iowa, by a mutual friend, Juanita Hoopman. Jeannie, after the death of her first husband, Jeanette's dad, started an ad agency with Juanita. Records I found show Spriggs Hoopman Advertising Agency was incorporated in March of 1994. Juanita is dead. She got breast cancer and died 8 years after teaming up with Jeannie. The woman I have, the next best thing, is Colleen Finley. Colleen says she was approached by national media twice years ago. They tracked her down through the blog and web sleuths. At the time, Jeanette asked her not to talk. The FBI investigation was still a thing, so Colleen turned them down. Not willingly, but out of respect for Jeanette. She is silent no more. Colleen was a secretary for their ad agency and spent time with Jeannie.
I even still have my coffee tub that says Spriggs Hoopman Advertising on it.
Colleen says Juanita was a matchmaker.
Juanita was always trying to hook Jeannie up with somebody because she felt sorry for her, and she kept saying, you need a good guy. You need a good guy. And she was on the phone with Roy for something one day. All of a sudden, she got this big grin on her face, and she looked at Jeannie, and she said, this is who you need to meet. You two are perfect for each other. So she set something up one night to introduce them.
They were engaged 2 weeks later in the fall and then married on December 17th, 1994. Colleen says one day during lunch at the office, which was also Juanita's apartment, Jeannie put her hand up on the table to reveal an engagement ring. Love bombs were exploding.
It was a short time. It kind of was a whirlwind. She was getting in love, but so was he. And he just looked at her with those, puppy dog eyes like a guy does when he's, really gone. And he was really gone. He was very much in love. When they were together, it was like, nobody else was in the room. You saw these little doves and hearts floating in the air around them. And, it was just the sweetest little thing. It was almost like watching two high school kids. And it was really cool. And like I say, they'd Honey and Sweetie, and he'd pull out the chairs, open the car door, open the door to the building. And it was really, really nice.
I see in Roy's obituary it says, Roy's many talents included playing the piano and organ. That would have been something they both loved and had in common, giving them another instant connection. From Jeannie's writings. We packed up and moved for the first time in my life around Thanksgiving. I said tearful goodbyes to my friends in LaBelle and even to a boyfriend who wrote to me and enrolled in Quincy Junior High School, which had about 1,500 students in just the 7th and 8th grades and was at the time the largest junior high in the state of Illinois. While I was enrolling, I met a man who taught choir, but had a special choir, that's in quotations, that met before school. He immediately took me into his room and gave me a piano, and this is in quotations too, sight reading test of some of the numbers the choir was singing and made me the official accompanist. The 8th grade had 2 bands of about 150 apiece, and my audition there landed me first chair in the A band. It was very frightening to be in such a large school, changing classes and teachers every period, but I adjusted very quickly and loved it. The special choir soon turned into auditions for a musical that was being performed in the spring. I became the rehearsal pianist for the musical and began practicing for the spring music contest, where I was playing accompaniment for 5 soloists and playing piano solo. I might add here that Jeanette says her mom played the organ for the Morman Tabernacle Choir in Utah, all alone in the huge auditorium. It's considered a big honor. I don't know what it takes to get that chance, but talent is at the top. Everyone says that about Jeannie. Very smart and very talented. Rayanne, Jeanette's lifelong friend, says her church was having a road show and she needed help on the piano. Jeanne was visiting in Utah.
I said to Jeanette, hey, do you think your mom would play for me? And she's like, oh, sure, she'll do it for you. So they came up on a Friday night. Jeanne looked at the music, like, for one rehearsal and played through with everybody, and then she performed it for me. So I didn't have to do it. She accompanied everybody and just jumped in there and did that. So I was very grateful for that, very much appreciative.
Jeanette says her mother commented that she liked Roy because he was kind to her, a different person than Jeanette's dad, Dennis. Jeanette talking about her dad here.
He was a difficult man. We were in Kirksville sitting at a restaurant, and she started crying, which was very uncharacteristic of her. And she said, your father was very controlling in all aspects of our marriage, including the bedroom, and I need to talk to someone, but not to you. And she pointed at me when she said that. And I believe it's because I was pushing her on asking her some questions about his death again. I was asking her too many questions, I guess, but she did break down. And then I was worried. I thought, what did he do to her? And the next day I said, can I ask you about that? And she said, what? I never said that.
Jeanne later references conversation in an email. Jeanette works to confirm all aspects of incidents that seem important in their lives. Jeanne wrote, I do remember our conversation at Golden Corral. It's Jeanette's way of getting little answers, confirmations from her mother over space and time, keeping every note, every email, every medical record.
These are things that, as I went along, I point by point verified with her via email over time, using time as my weapon, because presented with the whole story in front of her, no way would she swallow that. But presented in small chunks, like, remember when the salt and pepper shakers had a skull and crossbones on it? Oh gosh, I didn't do that. The person that did that was Denise. I mean, it was probably in poor taste, but she just put those on there as a joke. And it said, this is my poison on her salt and pepper shakers. I was tired of her telling everyone I was a liar. You know, it was really messing with me.
Clint is Roy's oldest son. He lives in the Kansas City area now. He says his dad kept things interesting.
Him and my parents were married for, God, I don't know, 10 years maybe. I was about, well, it was actually Valentine's Day in 1970. He came home that morning after being out all night until him and Mom got into it and they left. He left. So then I had a string of stepmothers. And number 4 is Jeanne. We all know Jeanne.
News of his dad getting married to this woman came out of nowhere.
I didn't know anything about him even dating, much less getting married, until they announced they were getting married. We got up there and Dad introduced us to her, and then she kind of wandered off, and me and my dad and my brother went outside and had a cigarette. And Dad turned around and said, her last husband died under suspicious circumstances. I just busted out laughing. I thought he was fucking with me. He wasn't. He was serious. And I don't know if you know that or not, but they exhumed her first husband.
We'll get to that. Clint says his dad, Roy, always fashioned himself a ladies' man. So when Jeanne popped out of nowhere with her Mormon family, Clint wasn't sure what to think.
So different from us. You know, Spriggs is, and, you know, like Jeanette, she's just like I guess if you have an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other, she'd be the angel on your shoulder telling you shouldn't be doing that. And I'm the one on the other side, you know. I was always the honorary ass, you know, but their whole side of the family is just completely different than that. They're completely different than us. So it was shocking, you know.
Clint tells me the few times his family was at the house visiting, Jeanne would go to bed with a headache. Jeanette says her mom, ducking away, not feeling well, was a common theme.
If there was any type of a difficult conversation to be had, whether it be about, well, can we talk about what happened to Dad again? Or can we talk about what happened to our money that's missing? Then she was always too sick to talk about it.
Clint says after the wedding, his dad started pulling away. Conversations and visits nearly stopped.
It was a 3-hour drive from Potomac to Columbia, and he'd come down to Columbia just for the hell of it, he came down one time, handed the kids a bag of candy and turned around and went back home. Took him 6 hours to get down there and back, and all I got out was a couple hugs. He was just kind of like that, but then when Jeanne showed up, all that bullshit changed. I didn't hear from him a half a dozen times in the 4 years that they were married.
And when Clint got married, no show, no gift, nothing. Clint says his dad changed during his time with Jeanne. He was more reserved. Clint thought maybe it fit into Jeanne's lifestyle better.
Her kids, with the exception of Jeanette, follow her around like puppies. I mean, Morman, they're good Mormon kids, that it's mom first, period, nothing else. And so they're like that. And Jeanette's not. She's got a little bit of an independent go fuck yourself streak, I like that a lot about her. She's the only kid in the family that has it. And if she hadn't been alive, I wouldn't have any idea what had happened to Dad.
Now, Jeanette and Clint met briefly the day of the wedding and then no contact for like 15 years or so. After Bruce, husband number 3, and the private detective, they started piecing together the timeline of when Roy got sick and then went crazy. I've scoured through many, many emails Jeanne has written about her time with Roy, his medical records from the Mayo Clinic, police reports, and other gems Private Detective Mark Nozak was able to dig up. From what I can gather, it started with money problems, like many of Jeanne's worries. A pattern. Money seems to be at the center of many of her troubles.
She asked me for money a couple of times while she was married to Roy. And so that's when I thought, what is going on? Because she'd gotten all of that life insurance money. And my father died in 92. She just sold her house for cash for $105,000. I didn't understand why she needed money, and I didn't really realize that was indicative of problems in their marriage, but it ended up being that way.
Colleen, the secretary for Jeanne and Juanita's ad agency, says Juanita expressed concern after a visit with Roy.
She said he was missing $35,000 out of one of his accounts, and he said, well, that's not the first time. And he was over there a few more times over things like that. And he was just not a happy camper at some of the things that went on. And she wouldn't ask him or say anything, and things would just be missing. And I guess he had some antique jewelry, like a pocket watch from, I believe it was the 1800s. And it was jewelry that had been in the family that, he was keeping for his kids. And all of a sudden it was gone.
As I mentioned, Jeanette says money has always been an issue with her mother.
I did reflect back that she used to steal money from us as kids all the time. And there was always money missing. I accepted her for that. I thought, we're going to forget the money thing. Something's going on with her and money. And so I would send her $500 or so. And then she'd call back and say she needed a little bit more. I was living in Utah and she was in Iowa.
Colleen says she saw Jeanne and Juanita argue over money.
Be kind of unkind when they'd be talking about something, and she'd say, well, I really need a paycheck. And she'd, well, don't you think I need a paycheck too? I have house payments, and, that kind of thing. But no, she wasn't never mean to her, but she said, that he'd argue with her, I guess is a good way to put it.
Jeanette says she flew out to Iowa from Utah to see what the deal was. And her mom became very defensive and flustered, saying her money was tied up. Jeanette checked around with others in her mother's life who said they were concerned about Jeanne's finances. Juanita expressed to Jeanette that she was upset because she was no longer getting any money from the ad agency. 2 years after Roy and Jeanne were married, Jeanne asks Jeanette for money. In October of 1997, Roy, according to his medical records, went to the emergency room with bloody feces. He's sick. A few weeks later, in December of 1997, Jeanette visited her mother in Ottumwa, Iowa. She was shaking, 22 hours a day, she says. Everyone was worried Jeannie was having some sort of neurological breakdown. Wasn't losing weight, looked okay, but she couldn't stop shaking.
Then Roy pulled me aside because during that time, it's not like everyone was around. My sister Denise was on a mission in Australia, I believe. My sister Chris never came back to visit anyway. And I think Will was just about to go on a mission. He wasn't around really either. So I was the one, I was her oldest. I was always her confidant. I was the one that helped her. She didn't ask them for money. Always asked me. If it was time to buy presents, if it was time to wrap things up, do family stuff, it was me. So Roy grabbed me and said, I'm very concerned about your mother, and I don't know what's going on with her and why she's so sick. And I said, I don't know either. And so that's when he had asked me some questions just about her money. He said, she's supposed to be paying me a monthly fee, and she hasn't since we first got married. And I said, oh my gosh, Roy, I have nothing to do with that. That's between you guys. I'm so sorry that happened. And I'm just glad you're here for my mother. And then he said, how did your dad die? And I said, honestly, we're not really sure. We kind of think he either had a heart attack or maybe he committed suicide, but it's just kind of unknown because there wasn't an autopsy. And he said, oh, okay. So that was our conversation. Mostly I was just trying to figure out how to help my mother.
After this visit, Jeannie started piling on reasons why she was sick. Lupus, fibromyalgia.
She would say they found out she had all sorts of illnesses, a brain tumor even during that time. And we're just constantly worried about her. And finally, I just lost the worry, Jeanne. I just said, Mom, did they diagnose you with that, or are they just considering testing you for that? And she said, well, they're testing me.
I see in an email years later, Jeannie claimed migraine medicine was making her shake. As the Spriggs-Hoopman advertising agency business tanked, Jeannie took a job as the executive director for the Ottumwa Chamber of Commerce. In emails, Jeannie says she was investigated for embezzlement but was cleared of wrongdoing. Roy's oldest son, Clint, disputes this.
I have a buddy up there that said it did happen. He was a cop. He was a cop buddy, and I don't think the police were involved, but he knew about it through the food chain. And he said the only thing that kept her out of the federal penitentiary was Dad writing a big fat check. He said, I don't know where in hell your dad got all that money, but I suspect he was selling dope. He just laughed and laughed and laughed. He said that was a fat check. From what I heard, it was somewhere between $30,000 and $60,000 that she stole from them, and nobody can figure out what she bought or anything. It's just crap, apparently. And I'll tell you what, when Roy bounced his checkbook, if he was off by a penny, it was time to start drinking, because he couldn't stand not knowing where his money went. And when it started disappearing because of Jeannie, the war was on, I'll bet.
Clint says years later, going through his dad's things, he found proof. A check made out to the chamber.
$32,000, I think, and at the bottom it said one of two. Yeah, we found it in his upstairs office. He had it in, there was a big folder with this stuff with little hints about the Chamber of Commerce thing, but he had a lot of stuff. I didn't know what the hell to think of that one.
Colleen says Jeannie's one-time business partner, Juanita, had a similar story. I didn't even have to ask.
Jeannie was hired by the Chamber of Commerce, Ottumwa Chamber of Commerce, and she really had no training whatsoever, didn't know much about it, and walked in there and walked out with the job. They came up missing a good deal of money, several $1,000s, and to keep from having it publicized, she left her job and Roy paid the money off. I don't remember now how much it was, but it was several $1,000s.
Jeannie later again tried to explain this away. In an email she wrote, as for a check that Roy wrote to the chamber, He was responsible for writing checks for a large organization he ran. It's called SIDA, Southeast Iowa Drug and Alcohol. The check could have been for dues, a contribution, or a large auction item that he decided to purchase. It's not really the name of the place. I mean, it's called SIDA, but it's actually Southern Iowa Economic Development Association. Both his son and Colleen, though, say that this was not Roy's role at the community organization. He would not have been floating this place thousands of dollars from his personal account. In March of 1998, Jeanette had her first baby, a boy, Luke. I've seen home videos.
Say, playing? Have you been playing and talking to Mommy? Hey! Hey, talk to him. He's got very complex ideas. This is how Luke likes to spend his afternoons, listening to Beethoven and rocking in his swing, getting culturally enriched.
Matt is so happy, and Jeanette is all smiles.
Are you having fun in your sandbox? So we live pretty close to the mountains, and now Luke and I are going to go for a stroll.
You can tell she loves being a mom.
With his swim diapers on.
4 months later, Roy had an episode at the golf course. He collapsed during a Chamber of Commerce fundraising game. His son, Clint, outlines what he learned about that day.
She said that he came home and he was disoriented, and that she at first thought he'd had like a stroke or something and he wanted to go take a nap, and she let him. And when he got up, he was still the same way. And I talked to a guy that had been golfing in the gang behind him, and he said he saw him tip over. He said he felt like a fucking tree. He said he felt like a tree right on his face. And this guy's name was Carl. Carl helped get him up and get him back off the green, back up to the clubhouse up there, or whatever the hell it is. He helped get Dad back up there, and then Dad sat there for a while, drank a cup of coffee, I guess, and got in his car and took off for home against everybody's opinion of what he should do, you know. They thought he should go to the hospital because he was pretty fucked up still, apparently. He went home and just went upstairs, took a nap, and that was the end of it, I guess.
Clint says his dad had always been so healthy. This was all very concerning. Jeanette says she didn't know about Roy collapsing, at least not right away.
At the time, we didn't know about it, and she didn't tell me about it, which was unusual that you would have your husband in the emergency room with such a serious condition and you wouldn't bother calling your children to let them know what's going on. Later, she wrote to me, and I have a note from her that says the initial event was toxicological in nature, is what the emergency room decided. And so I had asked my mother, did everyone at the golf course get sick? Because she said she's pretty sure they must have put something in the fertilizer at the golf course or something that got him so sick. And I thought, man, there's going to be a mass hysteria of a bunch of people falling over from being poisoned at the golf course, but he was the only one.
The next thing to happen took Jeanette by complete surprise. Roy called her. He had never called her before.
His voice sounded very slurred, and he said, "Oh my gosh, Jeanette," and his key points were, "Your mother stole over $100,000 from me. She has a meth lab in the garage. She tried to kill me, and she took off to LaBelle. I can't find her." He thought she went to LaBelle, Missouri with her parents, and he wanted to know how he could find her. That was a shocking phone call. My brother actually walked in my house because he was living with me when he first started college, etc. And I said, "Oh my gosh, listen to this man talk." And he goes, "Yeah." And he was like, didn't even look surprised. He's like, "Yeah, I believe it."
Jeanette says the conversation was so confusing to her. She didn't know her mother and Roy were having any serious troubles, and her mom were so close at the time.
He was slurring his speech. He did say something about some Argentine water that I had drank, and to not get any mail from her, not to drink any water from her, because that's what happened to me in Argentina, and slur. and that she had stolen over $100,000 from him, had tried to kill him, and had taken off, and he thought she went to LaBelle, Missouri. So I just thought he was going crazy, but I figured that she probably stole some money and maybe some drugs. But I didn't think she tried to kill him.
In a later email, Jeanette says he specifically said Jeannie tried to poison him. And how did he know Jeanette received a care package from her mother while on a mission in Argentina? It had to be Jeannie telling him this. But why? The weirdness of this part of the conversation didn't click with Jeanette until much later. Then immediately after the call from Roy, Jeanette started looking for her mother, Jeannie.
I immediately called out to LaBelle. My grandma answered, and I said, "Is Mom there?" And she grabbed it and she said, "Jeanette, has Roy called you?" And I said, "Yes, he just got off the phone." She goes, "Don't talk to him. He's gone crazy. And don't talk to him. Don't listen to him. He's gone crazy. And he's saying all these crazy things." And I had to run away. And I think she said that he was trying to kill her at that time. That came up later. And I said, "Well, I just talked with him." And she said, "Don't ever talk to him again." Well, then he called back. I picked up the phone and I said, "Roy, you know I cannot talk to you right now. My mother's asked me not to talk to you." He started in on the story again. And I just said, "I'm sorry. I can't, because this is my mother you're talking about, and you'll have to go with your family. Get support from your family. And I'm so sorry about this." She called back, "Have you talked with Roy?" And I said, "Yes, he called back." And I told him, and she goes, "No, don't talk to him. He's got pictures of your son. He could show up at your house and kill you all and hurt your son. He has gone insane. He has threatened to kill me." And I went, "Oh my gosh, when did this happen?" And she said that she thought he had eaten some squirrel brains or something from some people in Iowa, and that he had gone insane, and that he didn't know what he was doing, and his mind was gone.
Now, Jeannie had many theories about what happened to Roy. This is from that phone conversation later.
Remember, you were saying, too, that they were wondering, if he'd eaten squirrel brains or something?
There were a couple of guys in North Carolina who ate squirrel brains, or maybe 5 or 6 of them, and contracted Jakob Creutzfeldt. There have been 2 or 3 cases in Idaho just in the last year or so, and they're like they were with Bruce. I mean, everybody's just been scrambling to try to figure out what in the world, where these people could have gotten it and all this. But they also died right away. And so because Roy did not go ahead and die right away, I suppose that it's probably more probable that his dementia was a different type.
Yeah, that's the human form of mad cow disease. Oprah, in the trial that she won against ranchers, made this famous around the same time this phone call was happening. It was huge news. Oprah said she was going to stop eating beef after hearing about this brain disease, and ranchers sued her. The verdict came down in February of 1998, and Roy was admitted into the Mayo Clinic in September of that same year. Also, she says, Yakov Creutzfeldt. It's actually Creutzfeldt Yakov, switched. Jeanette first brought this topic to light when she was asking a doctor in her clinic about what could be happening to Roy. Jeanette told her mom the doctor suggested Yakov Creutzfeldt, and she told her wrong. But Jeannie latched onto it and never corrected it, then started spreading it to others as fact. In this recorded phone call and any email I could find on Roy going crazy and possible theories, Jeannie writes Yakov Creutzfeldt, never corrects it and never spells it correctly either. This just popped out as weird to me. Jeannie hears it wrong from Jeanette and repeats it over and over. Right after collapsing at the golf course in a fight to go to the hospital, Roy filed for divorce. I see Jeannie wrote in an email that July 25th they were picking out land to build a house on, And then Roy goes down a few days later. And then August 12th, he turns in the papers to call the marriage quits. In those following weeks, Jeanne purchased tickets for a cruise for her and Roy, a gesture, Jeanette says, to try and work things out. And Jeanette says years later, she saw her mom's bank book, an entry where Jeanne canceled the tickets the day after she bought them. In an email, Jeanne wrote, "He also decided that I was sick and was losing my mind and that he was probably going to have to put me in a nursing home. It was going to cost him an awful lot to keep me in a nursing home, so probably he would have to divorce me. He spent about 2 hours one afternoon showing me figures on a piece of paper that were really crazy about what it would cost to keep me in a nursing home and why I would have to be there. He also tried to prove mathematically why it would be best for him to divorce me. He told me that he still loved me, but that it was best for him that we do things his way and that I not protest about being put in the home." Jeanette fires back, "You did tell me about his threats to put you in a nursing home when we were at Christmas at Bruce's house about 8 years ago. What you told me was that when you were really sick, shaking, not able to function basically, remember having me give the speech for you in Kirksville, where you were shaking so bad your words weren't even clear. You told me for the first time 8 years ago that at the time Roy had threatened to put you in a home. Wasn't that the time frame for this threat to put you in a nursing home? I remember you saying, ironically, Roy was the one who ended up in the home." I find Jeanette constantly pushing back against timelines and storylines. Jeanne got a lawyer and sent Roy a 4-part proposal. Roy getting immediate treatments on there. Any divorce talk be delayed until he's feeling better. She'll turn her salary over to him and he can give her a personal allowance. And also on there, she suggests nullifying their prenuptial agreement. I have this letter to the attorney. September 3rd, 1998. Roy is taken to Jefferson County Hospital in restraints. A workup is done. Clint says his dad, Roy, was shuffled around to different hospitals.
I had talked to him a little bit before that. They took him to Iowa City once, and they could not figure out what the hell was wrong with him. And they noticed that his cadmium levels were a little high, though, and there's no reason there should be any cadmium level increase in a normal person's blood, so they knew something was up, but they couldn't figure out what. He goes back home for a while, and he goes to the Mayo Clinic. And they hook him up, and they do everything. They check every bit of him from one end to the other. And they can't figure out what the hell is wrong with him, other than they're pretty sure he's been poisoned. They're pretty certain of that. But they can't even figure out with what.
What Jeanette and Roy's son Clint didn't know was that Roy was screaming for help to local authorities. Everyone knew Roy, judges, police officers, court workers. I have a police report where he turned in a bunch of random stuff. The date is August 29th, 1998. 3 days after Jeanne wrote the attorney. In the comments section, it says, "Items removed from residence at request of owner. Owner having mental problems. Fears wife is trying to poison him. Hold until contact by attorney." In the itemized list of property evidence section, it has ledger and miscellaneous papers, miscellaneous foreign money, .22 caliber semi-automatic with 6 rounds in the clip, Uncle Mike's Sidekick Black, nylon holster, and a Rubbermaid container. The question is, were there cookies in that Rubbermaid container?
He had gone down to the police station, and she said he turned in a bunch of guns or something. She said Roy turned in some chocolate chip cookies and toilet paper as evidence that I was trying to kill him. And she said, I went down and talked to them, and they kind of laughed about it and just gave me the cookies back.
Jeanette says this story was a crowd favorite with her mother. Animated, laughing, she told it over and over. In later emails, when Jeanette asked about it, Jeanne said the cookies were Oreos, and if there were homemade cookies in the house, someone else made them. Jeanette says Oreo cookies weren't what her mom told her in person. Jeanette says she remembers her mom saying the cookies were chocolate chip. In an email from private investigator Mark Nozak to Jeanette, it's dated March 2006, Mark wrote that he contacted the Ottumwa Police Department and confirmed Roy filed a complaint
that Jeanne was trying to kill him. A gun and some food items were booked into evidence. He wrote the gun was returned to your mother and the food items were destroyed, but that there is no report on file. And that's the end of his note.
Officer Hucks, now lieutenant from the Ottumwa, Iowa Police Department, is listed on a report where guns were taken from the home. He had dealings with Jeanne, so I reached out to see if he would speak to me about Roy Forgy. He asked Lieutenant Jason Bell to handle it. Bell was great, appeared very helpful. He had the lady in records, who we'd already dealt with after filing a Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA report as it's called, fire up the old system, the old computers, to see if any more reports concerning Roy were hiding in there. I asked Bell about the cookies. Small town, Roy appears crazy, Jeanne shows up for the cookies. He says it's not right, but maybe Roy's poison theory was disregarded. Took the cookies, left the tub. It's just something I'm throwing out. Every time Jeanne references the cookies in emails, she says she assumed they were packaged Oreos. Bell asked Lieutenant Hucks if he had any information for me concerning Roy Forgy, and Hucks said he didn't. Jeanne was not supposed to be in the house. This was about a month before Roy's visit to the Mayo Clinic. So how did she even know Roy turned this seemingly random stuff over to police? I say this because Jeanne did go pick up the items listed on that paper. It reads, release information, yes, is circled, date is 5/10/99, authorized by Roy's attorney, his name, and then there's Jeanne's signature, Jeanne Forgy. The part about fears wife is trying to poison him is in the comment section below. So nearly 7 months later, May is when she gets a Chamber of Commerce job in Utah. So picking up these items, ledger, miscellaneous paper, miscellaneous foreign money, Rubbermaid container, .22 caliber gun with clip, and Uncle Mike's sidekick, black nylon holster, would have been one of the last things she did before she left town. What was so important in those 5 things? The gun? The ledger? The Rubbermaid container? Only Jeanne can answer that at this point. During this time, Jeanne claimed that at one point Roy was chasing her with an axe, trying to get her to leave the house. Jeanette, Jeanne's daughter, was so confused as to why her mother kept going back. Another thing that struck her as odd, if you'll remember, her mother had called her during the thick of the mess and said that Roy was obsessed with Jeanette's son Luke and that he may try to harm him. A few days later, Jeanne, the mom, wanted Jeanette to send a picture of her son to Roy while he was in the Mayo Clinic. Looking back, Jeanette thinks she wanted to use it to try and physically get to Roy, since he was cutting her out of his life.
She wanted me to include some photos of my son and write a letter to him, and so she could take it in, and that she felt that would be a good opener so that he would accept her as a visitor, that he could see photos and all of that. And I said, why would I do that if he's going to try to kill us?
There's points in time during our 7-hour interview that I'd get a bizarre look on my face. I'm sure of it. Some of this stuff is just unbelievable.
No, I remember at the time what's so crazy is I actually got a card and started writing. And I was looking for pictures and I went, what is wrong with me? She said that he is going to kill my son. And I am writing him a card and putting a picture. So I just said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. She did try to talk me into it quite a bit.
But Jeanette says her mom was insistent on a family picture.
She said, everyone, I want us all to get together as a big family in Oklahoma for Christmas. And my Christmas gift to everyone is that I am going to pay for a professional photographer to come in. Well, we'd never had a professional photographer come in. Number one, my grandfather was a photographer, so he always did that. But number two, this was in the middle of, he had just chased her up the stairs with an axe. She was traumatized. He's in a mental institution, she said. All of these things. And she said, I'm going to get a family picture. So I don't know if those photos were used as an opener with Roy. I don't know what the purpose of all those photos were, but it was quite important to her that we all show up and get those photos taken. In fact, the it was the only other time in my life that she'd ever thought photos were important. So that time in LaBelle, before my father died and my grandfather was ill, that was a demand. We must have family pictures. And so someone took photos, and my family took photos. And then this time she demanded that we have photos. Those were the 2 times in my life that she demanded photos.
Yeah, that one. The family picture during her breakup with Roy. That's the one I have on my desk. I see it every day. Jeanette has pink tags on the women in her family who are dead or have battled some illness, like cancer, and then blue tags on the men indicating the same thing, all labeled with their names so I know who's who. There are 8 tags. A big family picture. This is something Jeannie did with husband number 3, Bruce. Jeanette puts the timeline a few months after Bruce got his artificial heart, after he died and doctors revived him. I had a hard time getting a date on this because you can't see his machine. It must have been tucked under his dress shirt or his jacket. I found this photo in the files Jeanette sent over and started asking about it. That one was taken at the end of 2003. Jeanette had forgotten about it. It was Bruce, Jeannie, and all of her kids and grandkids. Jeanette looked at it, said her youngest daughter was probably close to turning 1. Bruce still had his leg. And, as Jeanette mentioned, there was the big family picture just before Dennis, her dad, died. Jeannie, the mom, demanding a family photo. That conversation being so harsh, direct, it stood out to Jeanette. And then, as we were wrapping up this project, Jeanette was digging through a box and found another family photo, a professional photo. She forgot about this one, too. It was in between husbands 1 and 2. A fresh family photo to woo a new man, Jeanette wonders. It's Jeannie, her 4 children, Willie, Chris's husband, and 2 of their kids. Jeanette wonders how she got them all together in one place for this one. They were scattered across the country, except for her brother, who was still living at home with Jeannie. He was a teenager. Is this a pattern? Before, after, during, life-changing events? Or does this Mormon mom simply like taking a lot of family pictures? It's just that initial demand when Jeanette was in college, just before her dad died, and then pushing Jeanette to send Roy family pictures while he was in the Mayo Clinic. Were they pictures with a purpose? And there's no crime to want family pictures.
Jeanette says her mom was adamant about staying in Ottumwa and taking care of Roy one minute, and then the next saying that he was going into a group home and that there'd be no money. Jeannie keeps showing up at Roy's house. We'll dive into his report from the Mayo Clinic, and Clint, Roy's son, gets a shock after his dad dies. Next time on The Toll. Poison Control.
And she goes, oh, this is happening much faster than I thought.
And he said, I just don't feel right.
Somebody poisoned her, that's for sure, but we just can't prove it.
No, who would do that? Only a crazy person would think you're being poisoned, really. I mean, I didn't think that.
He wasn't this on top of the world, happy-go-lucky, big smile genie at all.
Thank you for listening. The Toll Podcast, Season 2, Poison Control, is a production of The Toll, LLC. Creator, investigator, host, and audio producer, me, Nancy Simpson. Executive producer, Pamela Shelby. Original intro and recording by Jay Lashley. Special thanks to Shelby Powers for assisting with web design and original brand identity. Music by Fesleyan Studios. Reproduction or any part of this broadcast without the express permission of The Toll, LLC is prohibited. Get updates at our website, thetollpodcast.com.